Hello, welcome to the Happy Tex-Mac embroidery maintenance class. Today what we're going to talk about is how to keep your machine running at its best quality and how to achieve that by some basic maintenance settings. So what we're going to start on first is the hook, and then we'll lead into some other steps to keep your machine running at its top performance. Okay. So what we want to do now is remove the hook. How we're going to do that, there's 3 set screws that are going to hold the hook assembly in place. What we'll do, normally your machine is going to look like this. Your throat plate or your needle plate will be on. Remove those 3 screws. There's 1 set screw that you can loosen to pull the round shaft off for the cap frames, which will allow you full access to your hook. At that time, you can rotate your shaft over, and this is again to completely remove the hook. All 3 screws will have to be removed or loosened. Then the retaining finger will also need to be loosened up and removed. Okay, there'll be 2 screws. A 2mm Allen wrench will be needed to loosen this retaining finger. If you pull 1 screw completely out, you can slide that out of the way by leaving the other screw in. After all 3 screws are loosened, the hook assembly itself will pull completely out. Okay. Now, there's a few key features on a hook to be aware of. This part right here, the thread is going to pass over this edge, so there should be no sharp spots. A good way to tell is to take your nail, just rub it right along this very edge, this outside edge right here. It's polished, and if there is any sharp spots at all on that edge, right in here, you need to take a piece of crocus cloth and polish that edge out right in here and get so it's nice and smooth. When you take your nail and rub over that edge, there shouldn't be anything hindering that spot. Also, the very point of the hook, which is located right here, this point needs to be smooth also. It should come to a point, but if you take your nail and rub the opposite way, backwards like this, there shouldn't be any burrs or any sharp spot in that area. Okay? The basket of the hook, which is right here, the part that holds your bobbin, will spin freely. Okay? That part should have a little bit of play, but not excessive. If you compare an old one to a new hook, if it has excessive play back and forth, then it's worn out and it should be replaced. The whole hook should be replaced. Okay? So now what we're going to do is reassemble and put the hook back in. Alright, now when reassembling the hook, move the retaining finger, keep it out of the way, and before you put it in, be sure that there's no thread gummed up behind here. Any debris of any sort you should clean out on the shaft itself and behind the bushing. Take a pair of tweezers and pull any loose threads out. Alright, and then when putting a new hook back in, slide it on the shaft. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to turn over to L+23 on the dial, on your dial indicator itself. It should be at L+23. Okay. And at that point, we can lower the hook into place. We'll get the thread out of the way so there's nothing hindering the view of the point of the hook. Now, at this point, this is probably your most crucial setting. And what we'll know. So what we want to do is put a little bit of pressure on one of the set screws. And we're going to be able to move the hook just slightly, but it's not going to rotate freely. And this will allow for fine adjustments. What we need is the hook itself to just protrude on the left-hand side just a little bit, the point of the hook, just like that. There's going to be normal hook play, which should just rotate just slightly like that. That's normal, and it should be there. If it's not, we'll talk about that later, but you should have a little bit of left and right play, and you want the point of the hook right here to poke out on the left-hand side of the needle when the play is forward, and when the play is back, you should not see it. Now, the most critical is the distance between the hook itself and the needle. Taking a small screwdriver, you can push forward on the hook. You should just have a very little bit of flex there. You'd be able to fit like 2 threads the thickness of two threads together should pass through there, just like that. Okay? And if you need to, you can wedge forward from the back of the hook. You can bring it forward a little bit, or there's a flat spot on the left-hand side of the hook that you can tap backwards on. Okay, you shouldn't have to really smash it, but the screw is just tight enough to move slightly. Okay, and then I usually like to place one finger and just push slightly on the needle itself until it touches. Okay, shouldn't be a whole lot of flex there. That is the most important part about the timing of the hook. Once you achieve that, tighten up the hook a little more so it's not going to move on you. Check it again. Always double check your work. And then what we're going to do is rotate the shaft around and tighten these up. Okay, now after all three set screws are good and tight, and that's very important, very tight on those screws because it is a moving part with vibration and moving. It'll loosen up if the set screws on the hook itself are not very tight. Okay, then we want to replace our retaining finger, being sure there's no scratches or anything on the retaining finger itself. It should be smooth because the thread is going to pass by here. Okay. Now what we're going to do is go into the notch on the hook itself, or on the basket itself, replace the screw, and don't tighten that up yet, just put it in the slot so it's not going to move out when you engage your hook or engage your needle. Turn it over, just bring it down till it's about at its lowest point, just so the needle is passing through. Now what we're going to do is you want to leave about 1 millimeter's distance between the tip of the retaining finger and the basket itself. Line the retaining finger up so it's centered with the needle. Okay, like this. And then again, about 1 millimeter's distance in between there. And tighten up. Just snug them just a little bit, each one. Then when you tighten one, just snug it and tighten the other, because if you tighten one all at the same time, the retaining finger is going to want to move with the screw and it'll pull out on you. So just tighten a little pressure on each one and then you'll be set. Okay. When you're setting up your machine and you need to turn over, you'll have a dial indicator on your machine, and this is stating where the main shaft is. On the single head, you'll have a cap like this. On any larger machine, it'll be located on the far left of your machine, following your main shaft down to the end. Now, and the same rubber cap will cover. So if you turn clockwise, like this, turn over to L, which is 0, which is bottom dead center of the machine, and L plus 23 is what we're referring to. So if you turn over to L plus 23, to the top of the line, let me point with a pointer here, when this top line follows to L plus 23, that is where you want your main shaft to be. So right there. That's where your hook timing should be when setting the machine up.